The impact of shell shock. Definition of shell shock. Shell shock, also known as combat stress reaction, was a psychological condition that affected soldiers during World War I due to the trauma of warfare. Origins of term. The term, shell shock, initially referred to the belief that the condition was caused by the concussive force of exploding artillery shells. Psychological trauma. Shell shock encompassed a range of psychological symptoms, including anxiety, panic attacks, nightmares, and emotional numbness, often triggered by the stress of combat. Prevalence in World War I. Shell shock was prevalent among soldiers from various nations during World War I, affecting an estimated 10% of British and 20% of German soldiers. Physical symptoms. While primarily a psychological condition, shell shock could also manifest physically, with symptoms such as tremors, headaches, and sensitivity to noise. Stigma and misunderstanding. Initially, soldiers with shell shock faced stigma and misunderstanding, as the condition was not well understood, and some believed it reflected weakness or cowardice. Evolution of understanding. Over time, medical professionals and military leaders began to recognize shell shock as a legitimate psychological response to the trauma of war. Treatment approaches. Treatment for shell shock varied, including rest, talk therapy, and in some cases, more experimental approaches like electroconvulsive therapy. Contributing factors. Constant exposure to the horrors of trench warfare, including artillery bombardments, gas attacks, and the constant threat of death, contributed to the development of shell shock. Long-term impact. Shell shock could have long-term consequences, affecting a soldier's ability to reintegrate into civilian life and leading to post-war psychological issues. Literary representations. Shell shock is depicted in various works of literature, including poetry by war poets like Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen. Recognition as PTSD. The understanding of shell shock laid the groundwork for the modern diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Impact on military psychology. The recognition of shell shock prompted advancements in military psychology and the development of strategies to address the mental health of soldiers. Cultural influence. Shell shock had a significant impact on the cultural perception of war, challenging romanticized notions and highlighting the mental toll of conflict. Veterans advocacy. The experiences of soldiers with shell shock led to increased advocacy for the rights and support of veterans, emphasizing the importance of mental health care. Rehabilitation programs. In the post-war period, rehabilitation programs were established to address the mental health needs of veterans, recognizing the enduring impact of wartime trauma. Art therapy. Artistic expression, including writing and painting, became a therapeutic outlet for veterans with shell shock, providing a means to process their experiences. Recognition of invisible wounds. Shell shock played a crucial role in shifting societal attitudes toward mental health, emphasizing the importance of recognizing invisible wounds. Impact on military policies. The understanding of shell shock influenced military policies and procedures, emphasizing the importance of mental health screenings and support for active duty personnel. Global consequences. The impact of shell shock extended beyond the battlefield, affecting families, communities, and the overall societal perception of mental health. Interwar period. The lessons learned from dealing with shell shock influenced approaches to mental health in the interwar period, with efforts to develop more humane and effective treatments. Memorialization of veterans. The recognition of shell shock contributed to a more compassionate approach to the memorialization of veterans, acknowledging the psychological toll of war. Challenges of diagnosis. Diagnosing shell shock presented challenges due to the lack of clear physical symptoms, contributing to the initial skepticism about the condition. Medical advancements. The study of shell shock contributed to advancements in the field of psychiatry, fostering a better understanding of trauma-related disorders. Continued relevance. The impact of shell shock continues to be relevant in understanding the psychological effects of war, shaping contemporary discussions on veterans' mental health.